The Winter War is a lesser-known conflict between Finland and the Soviet Union. It was a confrontation that occurred just a few months after the beginning of World War II. While everyone, including the combatants, expected a quick Russian victory, the Finnish defenders surprised the world by bravely resisting against terrible odds. One of these unexpected heroes was a shy farmer who, despite facing the coldest winter in Finland's history, wreaked havoc on enemy ranks. Armed with only an outdated rifle, he caused the highest number of casualties recorded by a single man throughout World War II. Today, in this new episode of Military History, we'll tell you all about Simo Häyhä, also known as the White Death. Simo Häyhä was born on December 17, 1905 in the municipality of Rautjärvi, located in southern Finland. Surprisingly for a man who would sow terror in thousands of men, he had a normal and peaceful childhood on his family farm. He was a shy boy, with no grand dreams other than helping his father and brothers with daily work. To ensure food, he learned to hunt and survive in the dense forests of his country. His skill with the rifle was already evident at that time, as every shooting competition he participated in ended with his victory. According to his family's later accounts, the house was filled with trophies. You can hear his granddaughters talking about those moments before his fame.
Nehän piti puhastaa ne aseet, se oli tuvassa, hänellä oli se ase aina ja sitä rassattiin ja puhastettiin ja siikattiin. Mutta ei meitä pelottanut se, vaikka hän oli niin hyvä aseen hallitsija, että ei tarvinnut pelätä. Palkinnot oli silloin niin pieniä, semmoisia kahvilusikoita ja ei niistä siihen aikaan mitään sen kummempaa numeroa tehty. Minä en ollenkaan tiennyt, että hän oli niin hyvä ampuja kuin hän sitten loppujen lopuksi oli.
At 17, he joined the Civil Guard, a volunteer militia. At 19, he began his mandatory military service, lasting 15 months. Even during this time, his superiors could witness his skill with the rifle. According to his future biographer, Simo was able to hit the target 16 times in less than a minute at a distance of 150 meters with a bolt-action rifle without a telescopic sight. After completing his military service, he brought home 2 rewards, the rank of corporal and the weapon with which he impressed his comrades, a Finnish variant of the Soviet Mosin Nagant. But if he thought a quiet life awaited him on his farm, he was gravely mistaken. A neighboring country was casting hungry eyes upon Simo's nation. Before recounting his exploits, we must delve into a bit of history. Finland was for a long time the eastern region of the Kingdom of Norway. After the Finnish War of 1808, the Russian Empire annexed these territories, naming them the Grand Duchy of Finland. This arrangement persisted for over a century, although relations between the two peoples were never entirely warm. The natives always sought autonomy, rejecting the Tsar's attempts to integrate them into their empire. However, they had their chance after the Russian Revolution of 1917. Vladimir Lenin, one of its leaders, granted permission to minorities, if they so wished, to declare independence. The Finnish people did not hesitate. This was followed by a brief but bloody civil war that left the conservative and anti-communist party in power. With the opposing faction as their neighbor, in the newly established Soviet Union, tensions between the two territories only escalated. Joseph Stalin, the leader of the USSR since 1922, always made it clear that he desired to reconquer Finnish territory, which he considered rightfully belonging to Russia. In the height of World War II, he would have his chance. In the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, a secret treaty signed with Nazi Germany, Hitler and Stalin divided Eastern Europe between them. This is how Finland ended up on the Soviet side. Without hesitation, Stalin began his propaganda campaign. According to it, the Finnish government was violently anti-communist and represented a danger to Soviet Bolsheviks. Additionally, Leningrad, one of the most important Russian cities, was only 30 kilometers from the border separating the two countries, making it at risk of attack. The Finns knew that if negotiations were not entered into, they would be invaded. In these meetings, the Soviet Union demanded territory, as well as the opportunity to establish military bases there. The Finnish government repeatedly rejected these demands as they did not believe Stalin would settle for just this. After a month of failed encounters, the dictator gave the order. On November 30th, 1939, Soviet troops invaded Finland, marking the beginning of the Winter War. This is how the onset of this conflict was recounted at the time. The superiority of the Red Army was immense. They outnumbered their enemies by far in men, armored vehicles, planes, and artillery pieces. Everyone thought that the Russian giant would quickly crush its small neighbor, but they would be surprised by the locals' resilience. It was in this contest that the legend of Simo Häyhä was born. As tensions between the two countries escalated, Simo re-enlisted in the army. Just a year before the war began, as he saw international relations deteriorating, he began training as a sniper. His first encounter with the Soviet enemy was in the Battle of Kola, which began in December 1939. Dressed completely in white, he blended perfectly into the snowdrifts accumulating on the ground. The Russian leaders, on the other hand, were so confident in a quick victory that they didn't provide their soldiers with winter clothing. Their dark uniforms stood out. According to the records kept by his comrades, in the first 22 days, Simo had 138 confirmed kills to his name. The invaders would hear the shot, see one of their comrades fall, but couldn't find the shooter. When they panicked, they forgot their training and became easy prey for the skilled marksman. It didn't take long for this lone man to become a terror in the Soviet ranks. He even earned a fearsome nickname, the White Death. For Simo Häyhä, killing the enemy wasn't much different from hunting animals in his hometown. He would wake up before sunrise and head to a previously chosen position. From there, he would be invisible to Russian eyes, while he could see everything. He poured water under the barrel of his rifle so it would freeze and avoid puffs of snow every time he fired. He put snow in his mouth so his breath wouldn't condense in the air and alert enemy snipers. All of this with the rifle he had won years before, which had already become obsolete. He didn't even use a telescopic sight, as the glint of it in the sunlight could give away his position to the Russians. Moreover, his short stature, 1.60 m, made him a small target for the other side. Listen to the same White Death giving his testimony about how he differed from the rival snipers.
Se oli ne sensit, aika heillä on kiikäripyykiväärit. Ja me veikkaan, että ne ei ole vienyt ihan tarkalleen tarkkuuteen. Ne vei aina vähän vasemmalle.
Jaa.
Niin. Ja toinen juttu on siinä, että niissä oli kiikari, se kiikari nähdään, niin siinä pysyt tuovet ylempään. Niihin pitää aina nostaa se nuppi aina ylempäksi kuin mitä meikäläinen. Meikäläiset nuppii, kun on pystynyt vähän siellä lumeen pienessä koterossa, niin sitä ei oikeastaan siellä paljon silmät ei kyllä erottanutkaan yhteen.
But this wasn't the only way Simo fought. He also led a small squad on outings, where he engaged the Soviets in close combat. The deaths he caused in this manner, with a submachine gun instead of his rifle, were not counted. The Battle of Kola lasted until the end of the Winter War. Despite the Soviets throwing tens of thousands of men against the defenders, they couldn't overwhelm them. The invaders could only advance along the roads, as they lacked equipment to cross the snowy fields. In contrast, the Finns had been trained to move on skis. This, coupled with local defensive fortifications, incredibly impeded the Russian advance. At a point dubbed the Hill of Death, the Soviets attacked with an entire regiment, 32 Finns. Only 4 defenders survived, but by the time the enemy retreated, they had lost 400 men. Stalin was furious with his generals. They had promised him a swift victory, but his troops were being battered by what seemed like a handful of guerrillas. The public opinion of the vast majority of the world was with the Finns, while the Red Army was seen as a disgrace. The reasons for this resounding failure are many. As mentioned earlier, Soviet military leaders were confident they could defeat the defenders before the weather worsened. Therefore, the soldiers were not prepared to face the terrible Finnish cold. The winter, which had been Russia's ally, having defeated Napoleon in the past and would defeat Hitler in the future, was now favoring the other side. In addition to this, the Great Purge carried out by Stalin's orders in the second half of the 1930s had imprisoned or killed a large number of veteran officers and soldiers. Now, only the most obedient or loyal to their leader remained, but not the most capable. They couldn't counter the guerrilla tactics adopted by the Finns, which virtually nullified the Soviet numerical superiority. Also, for many, it was important for soldiers to know each other, as they were from nearby communities. These bonds made them fight with greater bravery, as recounted by a historian below.
Talvisodan henki, sen perustekijöinä oli kyllä se, että talvisotaan koottiin miehet samoista suojeluskuntapiireistä, siis käytännössä katsoen niin yhden kylän miehistä muodostettiin komppania tai tykistöpatteria. Siellä oli sitten nimismies, saattoi olla komppanian päällikkönä, apteekkarin joukkueenjohtajana ja sillä tavalla miehet oli naapureita ja tuttuja keskenään. Ja se sitkeys, millä taisteltiin ihan viimeiseen mieheen, niin mun nähdäkseni johtui ennen kaikkea siitä, että miehet olivat siellä rintamalla kovissa olosuhteissa niin yhdessä puolustamassa niitä kotisuomessa olevia perheitä.
Meanwhile, Simo continued with his exploits. Local propaganda, upon hearing about him, began to magnify his image until he became a heroic figure. They didn't need to exaggerate his numbers. According to his own records, he already had around 500 confirmed kills, only counting those from his sniper rifle. On December 21st, he had his highest number of daily casualties, with 25 deaths in one day. The press dubbed this feat Häyhä's gift to the Finnish people. But Stalin's patience was running out. By the beginning of 1940, the Russians increased their offensive. General Kliment Voroshilov, in charge of the forces on the front, was replaced by Semyon Timoshenko. Before accepting, he made it a condition that he couldn't be blamed for the number of Soviet deaths in the upcoming attacks. The Russian leader approved his request. Timoshenko changed the tactics adopted by his predecessor. He would make the most of their numerical superiority, regardless of the cost of life. The Finns were subjected to endless artillery bombardments, followed by simultaneous attacks at different points on the front. No matter how many invaders they killed, there were always more. The Finns needed to rest their soldiers, but the Soviets simply rotated them. While some recovered, others continued the attack. This was how, in a short time, the locals were forced to retreat, relinquishing much of the ground they had held for so long. Anyway, the Finns made every kilometer of land gained by the enemy very costly. Moreover, the White Death continued to be a deadly thorn. They brought Russian snipers to the front to finish off the sniper, but they all fell without exception. However, his luck eventually ran out. On March 6, 1940, a soldier from the Red Army hit Simo with an explosive bullet in the jaw. It shattered the lower part of his face, almost tearing off his left cheek. His wound was so severe that when he was found after the battle, his comrades thought he was dead. He was placed on the pile of Finnish corpses and taken away from the front. Only when an officer ordered his body to be searched for to pay him his deserved honors did they discover that he was still moving. For a week, Simo remained in a coma. He woke up on March 13, 1940, the same day Finland and the Soviet Union signed peace. Rumors of his death had already spread throughout the country. He even saw an advertisement declaring his death in a local newspaper. But he wrote to them himself to correct the error. You can hear him talking about what he felt when he was wounded.
Kun minä sain nassuja ja menin tuuskalle siihen, niin mitään ei kyllä, mä kyllä väitin pelas vielä, mutta mitään ei ole kyennyt liikuttamaan yhtään, ei yhtään minkään vertaa. Ensin hän meillä siis panna minut selälle askioon.
Nee.
Eihän siinä selälle olisi monta minuuttia, oliko siinä olisi hukkunut.
Nee, kyllä.
Mutta sitten kun tuo käännyi mahalle, niin siinä näysi. Ei mitään, niille tuonne, ei mennyt tuonne keuhkoon. Mitä niistä tuli valuu kalas lattialle.
Nee.
Ja lattioon.
Nee.
The tactics employed by Timoshenko had worked, and when the Soviets offered the Finns the terms of surrender, they had no choice but to negotiate. The treaty that ended the Winter War was a bitter pill for the invaded. They were forced to concede more territory than demanded by the negotiations prior to the start of the conflict. Much of this land was industrialized, so those benefits went to serve the invaders. They also had to allow the establishment of military bases on the Hanko Peninsula, but the staunch defense of the Finnish army thwarted Stalin's plans to annex all of their territory. While this conflict is counted as a Soviet victory, it cannot be denied that the heroic actions of the locals served to maintain their autonomy, while the Red Army and Stalin saw their reputation tarnished. After the cessation of hostilities, Simo had to tend to his wounds. It took him 26 reconstructive surgeries over 14 months. Although the scar obtained was permanent, he was able to fully recover. Already in good health, he was promoted from his rank of corporal to second lieutenant, something unique in the country's history. On June 22, 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union. Taking advantage of this situation, 3 days later, Finland began the continuation war against Russia, seeking to reclaim lost territory. Simo Häyhä wanted to rejoin the troops, but he was excused based on his combat injuries. Instead, he was decorated with 2 medals of freedom, an honorary rifle, and a farm in the village of Valakjärvi. There he spent most of the rest of his life, working the land. He also devoted himself to hunting and breeding dogs. His scar, which made him easily recognizable, and his shy personality, caused him to retreat more and more into his home. The battles also had a cost, as nightmares were a recurring thing in his nights. Although he spent a lot of time in solitude, he maintained relationships with his family and friends from the army. Despite his achievements, he was always very modest. He once stated, "I did what I was ordered to do the best I could." When farm work became too difficult for him due to his advanced age, he moved to a small apartment, and in the twilight of his days, to a veteran's home. He died on April 1, 2002, at the age of 96, surrounded by his loved ones. Now, let's listen to his family and friends remembering him.
Me annettiin hänelle juhlallinen, niin kuin vähän sotilas. Me reserviläiset se järjestettiin.
Minä muistan Simo sitä, oli tässä jossain mainittu tällaisen, kun he läksi niin kuin hyökkäykseen, niin sanoi, että tämä on meidän maata ja sitä täytyy puolustaa.
Simo Häyhä is considered the deadliest sniper, not only of World War II, but of history. According to his own records, he had 504 confirmed kills. These only count the deaths with his Mosin Nagant that he personally witnessed, and do not include those caused by his submachine gun or shots that he wasn't sure were fatal, so others estimate around 700 deaths to his name. While there is a possibility that some of these numbers may have been exaggerated by Finnish propaganda, there is no doubt about this man's accuracy. His actions during the Winter War inspired allies and terrified enemies alike, and in his country, he is remembered as a national hero. We've reached the end of this video and we want to ask you, what other famous sniper from World War II do you know? Leave us your answer in the comments section down below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to learn about many more military events that left their mark on history.